Lori Vallow, her missing children, Chad Daybell, his deceased wife. What were they thinking? On today's episode, we're going to do a Charlie Crimebuster investigation into the beliefs that both Lori and Chad had and how those beliefs may have, in their own mind, justified exactly what happened to her children and his deceased wife. All of this and a whole lot more right here on today's Charlie Crimebuster. Well, hello and welcome to Charlie Crimebuster. Delighted to have you with us today on the podcast. We have listeners all the way from one coast to the other coast. We're delighted to have each and every one of you, and especially welcome to any new listeners that we have today. We're going to be looking at the Lori Vallow case, her missing children, and we're going to talk about the religious beliefs that just may have had something to do with what happened to those children. Now, when I say religious beliefs, I say those beliefs as it was interpreted by Lori and Chad, not necessarily as the church's beliefs. We're going to get into that in just a moment. First, I want to share with you a number, 1-800-422-4453. That's 1-800-422-4453. It is a child care missing hotline, not missing hotline, but for children who have been abused. And if you know a child who's in an abusive situation, I hope you would take the time to reach out and try to help. And if you do not want to get involved yourself, you could contact the authorities, or you could contact this child care line, actually a child help line for abused children, 1-800-422-4453. Just wanted to do that because I don't want us ever get away in our investigation of what the focal point of the investigation is, and that is finding and locating these two missing children, JJ and Ty Lee. It is imperative that we find them. We're hoping that we find them well and alive. So keep that in mind and think about all the other children out there that may themselves be facing danger as well. And if you know a child that's facing danger, again, that number is 1-800-422-4453. Well, we have new information now in the Lori Vallow case. That new information may include who knows what happened to her children. We're going to also take a deep dive into the thinking of Lori Vallow and how she may have justified her actions through their fundamental Latter-day Saint religion. This and more we're going to cover today. Well, let's continue our investigation. And the first news is this: that these two missing Idaho children, missing since September, we hope that they will be found. And Vallow, who is known as Lori Daybell, she, of course, was arrested last week in Hawaii. We found the news today is that she waived extradition. She actually waived extradition this past Wednesday after a Hawaii judge confirmed her bail at $5 million. They denied a request from her attorney to reduce that amount at a hearing this past week there in Hawaii. Now, Wednesday's hearing came as a new subpoena was filed in Idaho seeking records from officials with one of the children's schools with properties in Hawaii where Vallow and her new husband, Chad Daybell, have been living. So there are several subpoenas out now, and there's several search warrants that are being executed trying to find out what happened to these precious children. Now, police said that Vallow and Daybell had repeatedly lied about the children's whereabouts and that the children may be in danger. Again, Vallow was arrested last week there in Hawaii. They arrested her on felony child desertion charges and also a misdemeanor contempt of court and other charges. Now, last week we went over the timeline of the story of Lori Vallow and her missing children. Oh, it was a twisted story. A twisted tale of 5 husbands, 2 who are now dead, 2 wives, which one is now dead, and a quickie marriage which included the wife marrying just months after her husband was killed, and the new husband, well, marrying in just weeks after his wife was found dead. It boils down to 3 very suspicious deaths and 2 missing children, JJ and Tylee. This young 7-year-old was an extremely smart young man with autism. He was actually reportedly reading books and doing math at the age of 3. Now, in today's podcast, we're going to get you caught up on the new updates, and then we're going to take a dive into how Lori and Chad may be trying to justify their very questionable actions. All this wrapped up in the justification excuses of their religion. We're going to get there in just a moment. But first, we'd like to take time to introduce you to our Courageous Citizen of the Week. Now, you that are on the podcast and listen to the podcast, you know that we try to take time every week to recognize a courageous citizen. And this one is a brave dad who was armed with a pistol, who stopped what could have been a mass shooting sometime back inside an Alabama McDonald's when he, this courageous citizen, took down a masked gunman who had stormed in and opened fire. Now, the unidentified father was leaving the establishment with his sons when a masked man walked into the Birmingham fast food restaurant, and that man started shooting. According to WBRC-TV there in Alabama, the father returned fire, and during the ensuing shootout, well, the gunman, the father, and one of the man's teenage sons were struck, according to the station. Now, the gunman, who was not identified, later died of his injuries. The other 2 injuries were considered not life-threatening. And a young man by the name of Marcus Washington, one of McDonald's employees, he told WBRC-TV he was making 2 quarter-pounders when bullets started to fly. Washington said he ran to the freezer, where he heard about a total of 15 shots fired. "I'm feeling grateful," that's what he told the station. "Wrapping my head around it all, I was just wishing someone would come and wake me up from this nightmare." Washington feared the worst as the shootout unfolded outside that freezer door where he was hiding. "All we hear is like different gunfire, so in my mind I'm imagining everybody is dead. He's looking for us." Washington added that he was thankful the armed customer was there. "He's my hero," that's what Marcus Washington says. "He's my hero because I can only imagine how it would have went if he wasn't armed. We might not be here doing this interview." That's what Washington said. Well, the father is not expected to face charges, and we are recognizing him today on this Charlie podcast as the Courageous Citizen of the Week. That's right, the Courageous Citizen of the Week. Now, our feature story today is Lori Vallow. What was she thinking? Let me tell you where we are in the case and the new information that was picked up this week. Now, for those of you who do not know the Lori Vallow case, let me encourage you to go to charliecrimebuster.com. That's charliecrimebuster.com, and you can listen to part 1 of the podcast, Lori Vallow, Where Are Her Children? In addition to that fact, well, now it is reported that Lori Vallow will waive extradition and go back to Idaho to face charges. We also have additional information on who might know something about where the missing children, JJ and Tylee, are. And that comes to us from NBC News. It seems the niece of Lori Vallow, the Idaho mom who was arrested last week, months after 2 of her children vanished, well, according to this article, some people think that the niece knows where the children are. In fact, it is the niece's ex-husband. He alleges that in court documents related to the custody fight that the couple was taking over their own children. Now, Brandon Boudreaux, who said in a petition filed in Arizona that he has serious concerns for his children's safety, that is, if they were placed in the care of their mother, in part because Melanie Boudreaux knowledge of the whereabouts of her aunt's 2 missing children and her unwillingness to cooperate with law enforcement in finding those children. He goes on to say it's daunting to the father. That's what the court document said. Now, Boudreaux says that his ex-wife is heavily involved in a doomsday cult in which numerous members, adults and children alike, have been killed off like flies. Now, Vallow, she's also been accused of being consumed with the doomsday theories. Now, since the release of this information, I should say that Melanie, through her lawyer, issued a statement denying that she had anything to do with the missing children and that she did not know anything about the missing children. Now, if you recall, Brandon Boudreaux, months before the mysterious disappearance of JJ and Tylee, well, he was shot at in Gilbert while driving home from the gym. In fact, that bullet missed Brandon Boudreaux by just inches. According to the court documents, that is. Now, the shooter fled and the investigation is ongoing. That's according to Gilbert Police. The attempt on Boudreaux's life occurred October the 2nd. Now get this, the Jeep that his would-be killer was driving, it was registered to Charles Vallow. And Vallow, of course, died in July the 11th. He was shot to death by his wife's brother, while his son Joshua and his half-sister Tylee watched. Now, Boudreaux believes that Charles' death, the children's disappearance, and his attempted murder, he believes that it's all connected to a radical religious group that the children's mother, Lori Vallow, joined about 18 months ago. He goes on to say, Boudreaux does, that I just don't know how people can get so wrapped up that they can end up in this space where these people are. It's just so radical. So to sum it up, here are the new updates. Number 1, Lori Vallow Daybell has waived extradition in Hawaii and should be to authorities in Rexburg this week. By the way, her new husband, Chad, who married Lori just weeks after his own wife was found dead in bed, well, he's already left Hawaii. And number 2, information released this week has Brandon Boudreaux stating that his ex-wife Melanie would have information about the missing children. And this is a claim, of course, that Melanie, through her lawyers, she denies. Well, as an investigator, often one has to find himself getting into the mindset of the criminal that he or she is investigating. And if we are to believe that Lori did something terrible to her children, it would perhaps be revealing to attempt to get into her and Chad's mind. And get into that mindset, in order to do that, you have to know something about her own religious beliefs. Now, Lori and Chad both profess to be a part of the Latter-day Saints religion. However, from what I read, their actions are more tied to the Latter-day Saints fundamentalist beliefs that can be quite a different theory than the mainstream people and how they believe. Now, I must say that as a disclaimer, the Latter-day Saints religion, well, many of them are protesting that alliance, and many have said the couple have strayed away from the center core of the teaching of that religion. But we can see something of what Lori does believe from the court papers that her late husband, Charles Vallow, presented when he was actively seeking a divorce. A reporter from Fox News shared an excerpt from what appears to be court filings that was related to the marriage of Lori and Charles Vallow. The reporter said that Charles Vallow filed for divorce back in February of last year, and the documents show that he was granted a restraining order against his wife. You see, Lori and Charles are referred to in the papers as mother and father, and the reporter said the statements were made by Charles Vallow. Now, according to the filings, Lori Vallow said that she was a transmuted being who cannot taste death, sent by God to lead the 144,000 into the millennium. Now, Lori and Charles, referred to as mother and father again, he also alleged that she was a god herself, and she was assigned to carry out the work of the 144,000 at Christ's second coming in July of 2020. And, now listen to this, the papers went on to say she would kill Charles if he interfered with his mission. So, my friend, if this is true about Lori, if she believes she's on a vital mission from God, and that this mission cannot be stopped, by the way, does that remind you of anything? How about terrorists that justify their own killing of innocent men and women and children by their own religious beliefs? Now, while I'm not suggesting that Lori is a terrorist, I am stating that her belief system can be similar. We do know that she believes that she will be a part of the 144,000 that will be with Christ when he returns, which, according to her and Chad, will be in July of 2020. Now, what is there to say that if she did participate in the death of her children, consider this ceremony that the Latter-day Saints Church, in a ceremony that's called sealing, and I get this straight from their doctrine belief. Quote, the process by which this is accomplished is called exaltation, a doctrine which includes a reunification of the mortal family after the resurrection and the ability to have spirit children in the afterlife and inherit a portion of God's kingdom. Now listen carefully. To obtain this state of godhood, the church teaches that one must have faith in Jesus Christ, repent of their sins, strive to keep the commandments faithfully, and participate in the sequence of ceremonial covenants and ordinances, which may include baptism, receiving the gift of the Holy Ghost, the endowment, and, get this, celestial marriage. Now, the latter ordinance, known as the sealing ceremony, reflects a singular LDS view, with respect to families. According to the church theology, men and women may be sealed to one another so that their marital bond will continue into eternities. And here is the frightening part. Children may also be sealed to their biological or adoptive parents to form permanent family bonds, thus allowing all immediate and extended family relations to endure past death. So, if your child dies, you're going to see them again quickly in this situation because she believes the millennial will be in July 2020. You see, Lori and Chad could also justify the death of their spouses the same way. Listen to this from the Church of Doctrine. Celestial marriage, also called the new and everlasting covenant of marriage, eternal marriage, temple marriage, or the principle. Well, it's a doctrine that marriage can last forever in heaven, and this is a unique teaching of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints of Mormons and branches of Mormon fundamentalists. And, stay with me, Mormon fundamentalism means that when Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, he was in the will of God, and that this teaching came from God and was not nullified by state law, therefore could still be practiced in the eyes of God. So Chad could see his deceased wife again after the resurrection, and now, along with his present wife, Lori. Remember that is according to them to come in July of 2020. So rather than losing their children, or Tammy, Chad's wife, they could just be temporarily set aside for Lori and Chad to focus on their job in bringing forth the millennium, which, by the way, is just a few months, because then, according to their beliefs, they're going to all be together in July 2020. You know, this could also justify their quick marriage. You see, for fundamentalists, they believe this as well. They follow a moral code called the law of chastity, which prohibits adultery, homosexual behavior, and sexual relations outside of marriage. So they're married. Now, she could not just justify it, believing they will return. Could she not believe it, maybe, and knowing that they will return with Christ on that day in 2020? And that she was chosen by God to be a part of the 144,000 with Christ. She could easily justify that her children are especially chosen to return with Christ on that day in 2020. Maybe that's the reason she's not saying anything. Maybe she's just waiting to that day in July 2020 to reveal to the world that she is the important one to lead others on that day with her resurrected children. Well, yep, you got it. There is some crazy thinking going on there. Well, that's the crazy music that we usually play before we share with you the crazy crook story. We try to lighten up a very serious podcast like this by trying to share some dumb crook stories. And this is kind of a unique one. Basically, the message was sent out by police in Cincinnati, and that is this: if a pair of spotty solicitors come to your door, just say no. And that was the message sent out by police in Connecticut on Sunday after some runaway cattle were photographed outside a Suffield home's front door. Seeing an opportunity to have some fun, police painted the four-legged escape artists as door-to-door merchants peddling what else? Well, dairy products. Early this morning, officers responded to a complaint of two suspicious males going door-to-door trying to sell dairy products. The police department posted on Facebook. Officers had determined that two individuals did not have a solicitor permit and were apprehended after a short foot pursuit. We would remind everyone to never open your doors to any unfamiliar cattle. Now, Police Sergeant Miner, he said officers were alerted to the animals after they were seen walking along the side of the road in the people's yards. That's what he told Western Mass News. And by the time officers caught up with them, well, they were outside of one home's front door. When we put up, that's right where they were when the picture was taken, at that person's front door. That's what he told Western Mass News. Now, after taking their photo, one that has been since shared more than 7,500 times, well, the officers helped the herd get back to their farm. And Miner blamed the broken fence for allowing those two cows to escape, and it does do good sometimes to lighten the load of humor from time to time. Hats off to the Connecticut Police Department. However, we are dealing with something much more serious than missing cattle. We're talking about real missing children. That of Tylee and JJ, missing since September, and it is not looking good at this point. So, on today's podcast, we're talking about Lori Vallow. What was she thinking? And we just covered how she could, and I'm not saying she did, but she could have used her own brand of her own religion to justify her actions. Now, there are others that are using the money angle as perhaps justification in some suspected other crimes that she may have been a part of. First, there is the shooting of her fourth husband, allegedly now by her deceased brother Alex. That happened back on July 11th. You see, Charles was coming home to pick up his son JJ, going to take him to school, and allegedly he and Lori got into an argument. And as they say, you report, he got a bat and hit Alex, her brother, over the head, and then Alex took his gun and shot Charles to death. Now, it has since been reported that Alex had a rather large life insurance that Lori thought she might get, which might, by the way, help her as she sets up for leading the $144,000 when Christ returns. The only thing is, unknown to her, Charles had just changed the beneficiary prior to her brother shooting him to death, which makes one wonder, could Tylee and little JJ know exactly how that death went down in that home on July the 11th? Could this be a motive in their disappearance? We hope not, but stranger, more evil things have happened. Something else strangely suspicious about this shooting was the way she informed Charles' sons. You see, of course, to her, Charles Vallow had simply passed away. That's what she told them. But he had not. He was shot dead on July the 11th by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who told police it was a case of self-defense. But Lori, she refused to tell her stepsons that or provide them with any useful information. She just simply sent them a text. Said this: "Hi, boys. I have very sad news. Your dad passed away yesterday. I'm working on making arrangements, and I'll keep you informed on what's going on. I'm still sure not how to handle things. Just wanted you to know I love you, and so did your dad." Well, the sons, they pressed for more information, but they received nothing in response. Here is one of their texts back to Lori. "Lori, it's been 3 hours. You're not that busy. I don't care what you're doing." She replied, "I'm sorry you're so upset. I'm so upset, too. I'm waiting to hear back from the medical examiner to make sense out of all this for myself. Please be patient with me. It's a crushing situation all around." Now, it's not clear why she would have needed to hear from the medical examiner to make sense. Police said she was there when Cox shot her husband. And the increasing exasperated sons by this time, they were pressing for more. I wanted to know about funeral arrangements, explanations. Here's what the other text says, going to her. "Okay, Lori, it's been 3 days. You let us know our father passed away over a text message. We need any information you have. What happened? When did it happen? How did it happen? Where is he now? Are there any funeral plans, and can we be a part of it?" I went on to say this is just not a nonchalant topic. You can just throw a text out and be done with it. Her response was, "Well, that's your dad's wishes. He and I discussed this a lot over the years we've been together. My plan is to have him cremated, as he wished, and then take all 5 of you kids to Hawaii to spread his ashes. He did not want a funeral. He wants a celebration of his life." Well, I might add, she certainly took the celebration literally, because it was also reported that on the very day that Charles was shot in her home, she attended a pool party with plenty of laughter and joy that same day. Literally, she was out at a pool party celebrating before the blood could even be dry from the floor of the house that she lived in. You know, somewhere I read that Lori also mentioned that there would be an angel sent to help her. And I'm just wondering if maybe that angel, you think it could have been Alex Cox, her brother? Could that have been what Lori thought was her angel? There are 5 instances where I see that could have been happened. First, of course, we know about Lori's. We're hearing now that Lori's brother Alex Cox, who is now dead, but before that, he shot and killed the fourth husband in self-defense. You see, and that's not the only incident he was reportedly involved in with Laura's ex-husbands, because Fox 10 obtained an affidavit for the arrest warrant issued for Alex Cox from back in 2007, back in Travis County, Texas. The court documents there reveal that Lori's brother, Alex, well, he was threatening to kill her other ex-husband. That second incident was at a child custody exchange in Texas. You see, Lori and her ex-husband then, Joseph Ryan, were exchanging their daughter Tylee. When Alex followed Joseph to the parking lot wanting to talk, there, he allegedly shocked him with a stun gun, threatened to kill him. Now, Joseph was able to escape, and that next year, her brother, Alex, pled guilty to aggravated assault in second degree and served 3 months in jail. So are you getting where I'm coming at from this point? There was Joseph, her husband, her ex-husband, that he threatened to kill and even went to jail for that threat. And now there's Lori's husband, Charles, who he did kill and claim that it was self-defense. But wait a minute, there's even more involvement that could be related to her brother, Alex. You see, Lori's niece, her husband Brannon, who was married to Melanie, her niece, well, Melanie had converted, and now she was involved in the Doomsday Cult. But guess what? She was wanting a divorce from her husband Brannon. And Brannon wanted full custody of the children. And then, on October the 2nd, someone took a shot at him. Thank God they missed it. But it was from a car that was registered to Lori's late husband, Charles. And then, of course, there is the death of Tammy Bell. She, first of all, was shot at with a masked man with a paintball stun gun that either malfunctioned or was not loaded. Or was it a paintball gun? She reported that, and then she died shortly thereafter. Now, remember, going back to Lori, she did not know that she was not going to get the money because Charles had changed the beneficiary. And we do know she needed money because she had stolen from his business account over $35,000. Wonder in her mind that God had given her an angel in the person of her brother to be her spiritual hitman. Could that be? And if we are pursuing this, it would be all attached to her religious crazy beliefs. Then you have to ask yourself the question, then why did her brother die? Jason, he died in December, as you recall. He'd just gotten married, and he died in December. Let me ask you this. Could it be the reason he died is that he knew too much about the other mysterious deaths that could relate back to Lori and Chad? Could he now become the fall guy for all of it, now that he's not around to defend himself? Because the call that was made on December the 12th in the afternoon hours when Cox was passed out on a home, well, now it's being investigated and looked at for suspicious circumstances as well. So how would her beliefs fall in line with the alleged murder of her brother? Is that a far stretch? Not really to me. You see, if you believe that God has you on a mission, to the point that you would do something terrible to your children, could she not think that God was telling her it was time for her brother to go be with God? And maybe he knew too much about it all, and it was time for her and Chad to get on with their own lives, so no attachments to keep them each from their dual role of leading the 144,000. You see, because after the death of Charles in July, the missing of her children in September, that's the last time we can document, and now the death of her brother Alex, we now have the death of her husband's late wife, who was found dead in her own home. Now, at the time of Tammy's death, the Fremont County Sheriff's Office responded to investigate. Sheriff Lee Humphreys said the coroner ruled the death is from natural causes. He indicated the deputies didn't find anything suspicious, criminal, or out of the ordinary in their investigation. But a dispatcher, who spoke with a Gilbert, Arizona detective after Tammy's death, explained how it wasn't just the coroner who didn't want to press the investigation any further. The family did not want an autopsy, so they went straight to the funeral home. The family refused an autopsy that was offered to them. Well, now, there are a lot of reasons why a family would refuse an autopsy, and it isn't necessarily uncommon. But in this situation, it may be a red flag that somebody's trying to conceal something. But no matter the family's wishes, you see now there has been an autopsy, and we're waiting the results of that autopsy. We do know now that in light of other circumstantial information, they have exhumed the body and tests are pending. Add to this, there was a $430,000 life insurance policy that Chad Daybell would receive, and he married Lori Vallow within weeks of his wife's death. Warning bells go off all the time. What was she thinking? Could it be that in the same way Lori said she would kill Charles if he got in the way of their mission from God, could it be that Tammy got in the way of both her and Chad's mission from God? Could they be the new Adam and Eve of the millennial, leading the 144,000 at Christ's return in July 2020? Now keep in mind that both these people are heavily invested into their own visions, according to them, that were given to them personally by God. If they are really into this zone, they would not fear man, police, or courts. They would have a somewhat religious superiority over all of us, maybe even thinking to themselves, we'll show them all in July, when 2020 comes, when we are the leader of the new millennium, the 144,000. And according to Chad's books, well, there's going to be diverse calamity, destruction, that the world will take notice. Their legal problems will be blowing in the wind as the new Adam and Eve lead the chosen 144,000 to reign with Christ. Hey, I'd love to hear from you about this case. I'd love to hear what you think about it. What were they thinking? We've set up a special email that you can communicate to us on the case, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That will go personally to me, and I'll answer you personally. You see, this could very well be what they're thinking, and it is dangerous thinking. So, as always, what are the lessons we can learn from this? Number one, be careful not to judge all religion, or even the Latter-day Saints, for the diverted, twisted thinking of these two people. Just as we have to be careful not to judge all Muslims for some Muslim interpretation of their beliefs, don't judge the Church of Latter-day Saints. I can assure you there are good people in the Muslim religion and the Latter-day Saints. Beware also of any teaching that would bring harm to innocent people for any reason. That is not the kind of thing that the God I know would ever command anyone to do. And remember, if you do see something, say something. While I hope I'm wrong about where JJ and Tylee are now, hope it with all my heart that they're okay, I'm not wrong when I tell you there are children right now, this moment, who are being abused by evil adults. They may try to justify their actions, but there's no excuse ever for hurting and abusing children. If you are a child that's being abused, or you know about a child that's being abused, go to the Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453. That's 1-800-422-4453. Well, this is Charlie Crimebuster, and we're into an investigation into the missing children and the surrounding suspicious deaths around this couple, Lori and Chad. We'd love to hear from you what you think about it, maybe on some topics you might like to hear us talk about, or maybe some questions that you might have, or maybe some observations and information you might have to help us as we try to get our mind around what really happened to JJ and Tylee. This is Charlie Crimebuster. Till this time next time, encouraging you to be safe, be secure, for the life you save, well, it may be your very own.